Okay, thanks for coming out tonight to watch me speak English. Very glad to be at HEC in Basel to address just a few of the many issues raised by Olia Lialina's provocative artwork, which seems to be getting more problematic as it gets older. The experiments of the 1990s now become part of our general cultural heritage, and we just have to deal with them as best we can, even if we have to juggle 2 or 3 Macintoshes at once. As Italo Calvino used to say, give them space, give them duration. And here, 20 years, which is an impressive feat. We're high technology here. We can manage every laptop in the house. So let me begin by discussing the important dot in net.art, because my boyfriend came back from the war, was one of the seminal works of net.art, one of the first artworks to use the structure of the internet as a platform for art, as I say in my little essay in the book of the show here. So why is net.art such a different kind of art than just normal art, which might be promoted or distributed on the internet? You could be, for instance, running an entirely conventional art gallery in Switzerland. You don't have to be in the electronic Künste gallery. You could just put pictures of your gallery paintings onto the internet. It's pretty simple. And you could say, hey, internet user, why not come over to the gallery and buy a painting? We have cheese, we have crackers, we've got wine, we have a cafe upstairs. And one would think, all right, that must be internet art. Well, yes and no. But the problem is that art is merely placed on the screen. It's superficial. You haven't done anything artistic to the structure of the internet that exists behind the screen. You placed art on an internet site, but you haven't made any art with the internet, using the internet itself as the art medium. Now, if you call your work net.art, that implies that you understand the addressing system of the internet, which famously uses dots, like .com, .gov, .ch for Switzerland, well.sf.ca.us, and so on, millions of dots. To be a net.artist, you have to understand something about the internet's inner workings, something about code, browsers, the conventions of website design, animations, GIFs, scroll bars, cursor movements, servers, pipes, bandwidth rates, so on, so on, so on. That is the basic grain of the material for net.art. Maybe you can deliberately rearrange those components, those processes, those graphic conventions, and make the internet do something fresh that nobody expected to see. In net.art, the internet is the medium and the material of the work. Now, I'm a literary guy. I write novels. So I'll use a handy metaphor to illustrate this. Cyberspace, that was one of our metaphors. The internet, a huge global machine made of thousands and thousands of processors, routers, servers, cables, and so on. Could be quite mysterious and intimidating. We could just call the whole mess cyberspace. It's cheap, it's easy to say, people like it. Or we might say that the internet is a Swiss clock. A Swiss clock, obviously there's a lot of craftsmanship and artistry in Swiss clocks. Nobody would deny that. That's why Swiss clocks are admired around the world. But what is a Swiss clock? Well, it's a form of timekeeping technology. People buy the clocks, they use the clocks. It's a nice experience. It's a technology, a public, and an experience. Machinery, users, and an interface. That's what's going on in the Swiss clock world. So let's say it's your wife's birthday. You buy her a nice Swiss watch. It's so beautiful, she says admiringly. It has such a pretty watch band. There are jewels on it. The face of the watch is well designed. It's legible. It's elegant. It has a nice interface. It's ornamentation. It's her personal jewelry. She is suddenly having a status-changing experience. The day is her birthday. Suddenly, she has become the kind of woman who can carry and display her impressive Swiss watch. She could show her fine Swiss watch to her mother, and your mother-in-law says, well, maybe it's not so bad that you married him. After all, 20 years, that's an awfully long time, You deserve some reward. So the art and design of the Swiss watch have won you some public esteem. Everything seems great. But you can go deeper than this surface interface and the mere experience of displaying jewelry. Because a Swiss watch also has good engineering. It is a machine. It has working parts that keep accurate time. It might be waterproof. It has a power source of some kind, maybe a battery, maybe it's self-winding. Maybe you don't really want to care about the engineering. Maybe you just want that nice, simple human experience of owning the watch and using the watch, but the watch won't work if it's broken. You have to have some concern for the mechanical, functional condition of the mysterious inner parts of the watch, even if you don't really want to understand them. Well, so far, everything seems stable in the watch world. The roles of the watch user, the watch face, the watch device as an engineering device, they seem stable, well understood, but now along comes a net.art artist. And she says that Swiss watches merely look like nice people using watch technology to have a status experience. Actually, that is mere convention. It's a pretense, a kind of false consciousness that serves the interests of the watch status quo. Because actually, a watch can have entirely different functions, radically different functions. A Swiss watch might be used as an art production machine. But how? Well, you hack it, basically. You pry the face off the watch, you remove the working parts, you subvert it, you deturn it, you make it do something else. After all, a watch has gears, a power supply, springs, glass, metal, leather, technical resources. Why should this toolkit be constrained to just accurately telling the time? Now, you might think that making art with pieces of clocks is a rather limited form of expression. Doesn't seem to offer much opportunity for free-ranging conceptual breakthroughs, but people will make art with clock parts. Anyway, I'll show you a few examples. Here's the Steampunk grandfather clock with the components placed on the outside, of course, to show that we're interested in the components. Here's a piece of steampunk imagery where a person simply has her mind blown by the very idea of clock parts. She's praying. She's having kind of a mystical breakthrough here. And it's like the clock version of cyberspace. She's a visionary. She's projecting herself into this imaginary world where there's wheels within wheels, clocks within clocks. She's young. She's got dyed hair. She's alternative. Things are going great. There's some nice popular cat clock business here, the old internet cat business, which Olia would properly call folk culture, internet folk culture. You know, the wheels are there. They've all got cogs. None of the cogs actually work. It's got screws. It has a face, several faces. You notice the clocks don't actually tell accurate time. The clock on the cat's head has no relation to the other clocks on the cat's other joints. But it is an internet cat, and you can put it up there, and you will, in fact, get some social traction. People are going to say, oh, well, we love your clock on the internet. Could I have, like, the T-shirt of that? Could I commission you to do one of my own cat? Here's the Chameleon clock. In fact, turns out you can do anything with clocks. Cats, chameleons, dogs, unicorns, dolphins. You can apply this, technique or hack or, simple détournement. Pretty much anything. It's pretty well established that people can, in fact, do this. It is kind of a small trick, but this is the micro version of the kind of net art business. You're taking the pieces of the clock and you're using them to achieve some other form of expression. But this is merely the folk version. What would be the net.art version of this kind of clock hacking? This. Here we got a Swiss engineer who's become obsessed with 3D printers, and he decides to make a 3D printed Swiss pocket watch. And literally every piece in it, except for screws and some connecting pins, is squeezed out of the nozzle of a 3D printer using traditional 3D printer plastic filament. So this is Christoph Lamer, and he's made a tourbillon watch, which is the famous watch from about 300 years ago. It's the first time, to my knowledge, that anybody's ever made a working Swiss watch entirely with 3D printing technology. So here's Christopher on his website. He's like, yeah, I've learned to make them. And, I think they should be like art objets, and you should, pay me. So would you like a white one, or would you like a black one, or would you like your own name written on the back, or perhaps you can commission me to do something? It's like, would anybody actually be interested in this? Yeah. Who? Me. I showed it to the guys at the Torino Fab Lab. They're all super impressed. I mean, we got a lot of 3D printers in there. Wow, this is a breakthrough, man. Give me the specs on that watch. It's like, well, it runs for 30 minutes, and it doesn't keep time very accurately. That is not the point, okay? The damn thing's made all of plastic. It's fantastic. It came out of a nozzle. Look, he's put all the moving parts on Thingiverse. We could hack the watch. We could do colored versions ourselves. It's like, let's get one into the house. Let's we'll admire it. Everybody will gather around it. It'll be a design objet, net.art style clock hack. It really exists. Couldn't be any Swisser. Really Swiss engineer. The guy's in the business. He's been in the clock business. He's he's gone down to the bedrock of what a clock is. He's redesigned the tourbillon mechanism. He's kind of piled it up. It's big, bigger than a normal watch. I could go on about it all day. I am a design critic. It got plenty of social media traction. Really impressive watch hack. So, what does that have to do with Olia and her work of net.art? Well, it's about this kind of questioning and critical attitude, like an attempt to get the technology or the medium to speak in its own voice. It's like, what kind of watch can a 3D printer make? Well, it doesn't really make the world's best watch, but it's making something that draws attention to the nature of watchness. It's like breaking you free from the limitations of thinking that a watch has to work. It's like putting you in touch with the interior beauty of the watch. It's educating you as to what goes on behind the interface. All the working parts are legible. You can download them yourself. You can print them out yourself. You can look at them online. You could master watch to speak. You could have an insight into what's going on that you had never seen before. And what is the upshot of a thing like this attitude? Well, this is like the wisdom of Olia at work here. And when I saw this note, I had to mess with it. I mean, this is sort of me taking a note from Olia's practice and using it myself. So what are we looking at here? I mean, what's really going on behind the surface of the screen here? Okay, this is a critical objection to this metaphor of the Yellow Notepad. Okay, Yellow Notepads, sticky notes, waste baskets, they're all part of a paper-based idea of what computers do. I mean, they're relics of the desktop computer era when computers were basically paper-handling machinery. They were document processors and laser printers. And many years later, a full generation later, we are still attached by the wrists and ankles to these metaphors of paper. So here we have somebody who's attempting to write a note, and he pulls up his Yellow Notepad, and then he realizes, okay, this thing that claims to be a Yellow Notepad is actually a fraud. I mean, it's nothing like an actual Yellow Notepad. I mean, it's yellow, and it's got lines on it, but it's got a battery charger up at the top and the date, and a 3G connection with a little spinning wheel and some bars. And then when I start typing on it, it immediately says today and brings up the date, which no piece of paper would ever do. And then it gives me a rather nasty looking font that resembles handwriting, even though I'm not using my hands, I'm typing, right? But I'm typing and I'm forced to do something that looks like bad fiber tip handwriting. And then down at the bottom, I have all this digital function that's just been pasted on to the bottom of my Yellow Notepad. I have a trash basket on my paper, right? I mean, okay, trash, the paper goes into the trash. The trash does not go into the paper, right? I mean, paper is a subset of the waste basket. The waste basket is not supposed to be the subset of the paper. And the same goes with the social forwarding note in the end and the little expansion thing, and then like flipping back into the rest of my notepad by using the backward arrow, which isn't lit up yet. So, when you start looking at it and kind of like counting the number of compromises and the number of broken assumptions, it's really, it's frankly hideous and overloaded with digital artifice and skeuomorphism. Skeuomorphism. Skeuomorphism is when you cling to the appearance of the past, even though it gets in the way of the function of the device itself. It's a deliberate form of archaism which makes you feel emotionally comfortable but reduces the function of the technology. It's like putting a fake brick front on a house which is supported by steel girders. Or in this case, it's like pretending that your compositional system is a piece of paper and disguising the fact that what you are actually doing is composing something on an operating system which is owned by somebody else. If you write something on a piece of paper, probably you're the only one seeing it. If you're writing something on this sticky note, who knows where it will go? Who knows where the system's been backed up? Who knows who else has access to your PC that you don't know about? Perhaps you're owned by somebody. Who knows if intelligence agencies are watching what you're typing? Who knows what happens if you actually press the forward button and send it onto a mailing list or whatever means you think you're going to distribute it? You don't really know where it's going. So there's like, the skeuomorphism is actually disguising a host of potential economic, political, legal, ethical, social issues that might be made more clear to us, right? So I broke the skeuomorphism by cutting and pasting something and just sticking it onto the sticky note, which violates it. I mean, no piece of paper can have another piece of paper on there. And it's frankly hideous because, as Olia has said, computers aren't technology, interfaces aren't experiences, and users aren't people. I mean, when you remove the rhetoric of the 1990s, which was users, computers, and interfaces, the kind of desktop metaphor, which had relatively clean power lines and political relationships built into it, and you replace it with the rhetoric of the 20-teens, which is technology, experience, and people, it actually erases your ability to think of yourself as somebody who can intervene in this. You're reduced to the powerless situation of the guy who thinks he's using the convenient Yellow Notepad, but in fact is engaging in some series of interactions or data displays of which he really knows very little and has no particular way to find out. And I agree with Olia that this is a somewhat sinister development, and it's one that an awareness of the realities of the 1990s can help us with quite a lot. It's important not to forget the model of computers, interfaces, and users, that the relationship between the person and the machine can be much simpler than it is now, that it doesn't have to be pasted over with surveillance marketing or the kind of social pressure that comes from using personal computers as socially mediated devices. It alerts us to the situation that we actually face now. In a word, it's not history, it's still quite relevant. So what is going to happen here? Well, these are challenges of the current generation. It's like, how can we build a better aesthetics for devices that is not frankly hideous in this way, that does not disguise what is being done? How can we abandon the skeuomorphic and be a bit more honest about our actual tools and devices? How can we deal with our paper heritage on computer screens without damaging both of them and making these kinds of monstrous hybrids? How can we manage the technology and make the clients feel at least somewhat comfortable without hiding the actual mechanics of what is going on? How can we deal with the security issues? How do we know who's reading the so-called paper? Who is in real control of the device? And how can we make the political issues of control more obvious? Why are users no longer allowed to use? Why can't you just use Google? Why can't you use Facebook? Well, they're social. You're not supposed to use other people. It's all right to use machinery. You can't use large clusters of people. But Google, Facebook, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft are not merely computer makers. In fact, they trace their roots to the personal revolution of the 1920s, but now of the 1990s. But now they are gigantic social enterprises. They have hundreds of millions of users, and their decisions are basically decisions of mass politics. They're not decisions of one person looking at her screen and deciding to alter the code or tinker with the inside of the device. I mean, the political exigencies and commercial model of Facebook militate against there ever being any Facebook.art. You're just not going to get into the guts of Facebook and run around barefoot, moving the components around instead of rebuilding it. Even if you have the skill of our master Swiss watchmaker who can 3D print the clock, Facebook is just not going to give you that. It would harm the interests of others. They have a million good reasons for you not to do it. They derive no benefit from that, and that's why you're not allowed to use. For Facebook, you're not a user, you are a client. You are basically Facebook livestock. You are the product of this social media thing. And when did the term technology manage to take over all other forms of technology? Why aren't they still referred to as computers? I mean, how did the computer business get away with this amazing act of imperial bravura? Because even computer technology is many other technologies besides digital technology. The internet doesn't work for a minute without coal mining, iron ore, chip manufacturing, shipping systems, financial systems, the retail of movies and music, pirate technologies, fraud technologies, espionage technologies. They're all wrapped up in this single term, technology, which seems to imply that, well, that's how it is. I mean, our way or the highway, you either use technology or you don't. Well, you're merely wrapping up a cluster of components and putting a shell on it and sort of expecting us to swallow that whole. And there's something fraudulent about it. It's objectionable. It's not honest. And why do people have experiences instead of interfaces? I mean, why are these devices so cleverly ingrained into our lives? I mean, why do we take selfies of ourselves instead of just looking at what we're doing? Why do we write things down on a yellow notepad instead of writing them on paper? Why don't we take notes with our hands? Why don't we draw with our hands? Why do we need this mediation in order to feel that we are experiencing our own lives? Whose purposes are being served by this kind of experiential design that wants to fold every human activity into the operating system? I know it's coming. The Internet of Things is on the way. Ubiquity is coming. Ubiquitous augmentation is coming. I've been watching it for my entire lifetime. The trend is very obvious. It's just one of the ways to break that hypnosis is to think as Olia thinks and demand the rigor of computers, users, and interfaces. It's like, no, this is not selfie. It's not me. This is an interface. This is an interface that I have in my hands. When I press this button, it's not a seamless moment of self-expression. On the contrary, when I press this button to take my selfie, giant wheels roll into operation somewhere in huge data barns. The cloud rumbles into operation. Coal trucks rumble out of the Ruhr. People are paid, bits of software go clinking and clanking just like the steampunk grandfather clock. I mean, it doesn't happen in front of your face, but an entire series of industrial things, in fact, actually happens. They're physical, they take up space, they have mass, they're not a cyberspace, they're not an experience, they're real machines owned by real guys, servers, blade farms, clouds, high voltage lines, fiber optic cables dug in the dirt. They're all there, they're all physically existent. All the components are there, just like the watch parts are there. We just don't see them. We can't kind of be bothered. We prefer not to. It's a burden to know about them. Nobody will ever know all of it. I mean, nobody even knows the nature of all the components in an Apple machine. Even the guys at Apple, it's such a complicated device that no human head could hold every aspect of it. You can't know all the millions of lines of code. You can't know all the hundreds of thousands of circuits, transistors, and so forth. It's a gigantic, mass-produced object made by a mass of engineers for a huge mass of people, and kind of the very opposite of the quiet atelier, the personal computer, the user, the device, the interface. Giant enterprises, GAFAM. The personal computer is going away. In the last year, the sales of personal computers, desktop machines, plunged by 10%. People just don't need them. They can use tablets, they can use laptops, they can use especially network devices. A genuinely personal computer, a computer that only belongs to one person, has no email, has no connectivity. Nobody wants them. You wouldn't bend over to pick one up. What can you do with a genuinely personal computer, a computer that just belongs to you as the empowered individual? As Jobs and Wozniak used to say, the Apple computer just for you. Those for the guy who thinks different, the lone cowboy on the electronic frontier. Nobody wants them. What could you do with it? You could do a spreadsheet. You could do some word processing and print it. Maybe you could edit a movie, but you can't email it to anybody, you can't send it to anybody, you can't circulate it through your friends. It won't take pictures and put them on the internet. It's just, it's an archaic machine. And, it surprises me to understand this, but I think I'm going to outlive the personal computer. I mean, I was an adult when they came into my life. I was, of the last generation to write novels on manual typewriters. I wrote 2 of them with, carbon paper and ink and what we had at the time. And then the personal computer arrived, and I thought, okay, this is really a big transition. And then when the internet arrived, it was also a big transition. But the internet was really, it was the death of the PC model. They're going to go away because they're just not social. And people like social media a lot more than they like these personal devices. But it doesn't have to be that way. And there was nothing historically inevitable about it. It's going to go away in the way that the fax machine went away, and I'm going to outlive it. And it will be a very, very, I'm grateful for that experience. It's for somebody like myself who's interested in the sort of technological parade, to see a personal computer arrive and also leave in my own lifespan. It just kind of, it's a real privilege to have seen such a thing. And it will go away, and it will be replaced by the social network device with surveillance marketing attached. It will be the computer, the interface, and the user will go away, and it will be replaced by technology experiences for people. What are we losing by that bargain? Rather a lot, and it's important to keep our heads about it and not lose it. So, epic struggle is at hand, 2016. I wrote a book recently called Epic Struggle of the Internet of Things, a pamphlet. You could read it if you want. But I was talking about the new stakes at hand with kind of the new relationship between computation and industry. The Internet of Things, putting tags and objects on things. These are the big 5, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, are the major industries of our era. They're as big as General Motors. They're like Detroit. But there were people who didn't care for what Detroit did and who were critics of Detroit. And we would have been wiser to pay more attention to them because Detroit did not end well. And in fact, the personal car did not end well. It may also go away in my lifetime and be replaced by some kind of networked, computer-driven vehicle. So, we would have been wiser not to bite that particular car apple as hard as we did. And in many ways, we're reproducing that rash situation. I mean, the Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft saga is working out in much the way that standard American industrial consolidation works out. They really are a lot like Detroit, and we're going to have to live with them in the way that we lived with Detroit for a while. And Europe will have to live with it, in Asia. We're just gonna have to invent methods of getting around it, ways to think critically about it, ways to just like not swallow that entirely. And I find that when I listen to Olia, I am embraced by this. I mean, her radical demand for user autonomy and user centricity, the Turing complete user, as she likes to call it, I think is a useful thing to hear. I don't agree with it, but it definitely wakes me out of my dogmatic slumbers. I'm happy about it because it makes me feel like an apologist for the status quo, which is something I don't want to become. It's not, there's an epic struggle there, and it's not one where, easy decisions are going to be made or where things are going to turn out well on their own. No, that's not what our decade is like. So I think Olia is coming into her own as a social critic and activist artist. She should be Dr. Olia 10 times over by now. The Academy should embrace her. In the meantime, net art and the art world have taken some strange turns. We will not return to the 1990s. I want to conclude by showing you this. This is Sedition.art, which is a genuine net art gallery without the dot in it. So I've been expecting a thing like this for many years. So when they came up, I immediately joined them. You can see that this is my Sedition Art account. So what is seditionart.com? Well, seditionart.com is a gallery that sells artworks on commission, curated, and when you buy them, which I do, you get access to an encrypted database where they store the artwork and then display it on your screen. So you're basically buying screen display rights in a limited edition, right? They can't be copied. They're not actually on your machine at all. They're just over in the server and what they call your vault. And this is my vault. And you can see I now have 15 works in my vault. And 4 minutes ago, I completed my collection of the works of Leah. It was often mistaken for Olia Lialina, but she's actually Leah. She's a code artist from Vienna. And she has 4 artworks on here. They cost 15 euros. So every time I buy one, Leah gets 8 euros. And, I'm thinking Leah deserves the 8 euros. I'm actually very much in Leah's camp. I've met Leah more often than I've met Olia Lialina. On good terms with Leah, and I'm happy for the opportunity to engage in a fan-artist relationship with her. It's I want to have your complete works, Leah. And I'm gonna pay for them. And not only that, but if I get bored with them, I can sell them to somebody else on Sedition. I can actually speculate, just like a guy who goes out to a gallery and buys art he doesn't like because he knows it's gonna skyrocket in price. Okay, I'm a net art critic. And we're rare guys, and we're very rare because there's no money in our business at all. It's stunning if Olia here manages to get 300 euros for her work from some well-meaning German art gallery. That's sort of awesome. But this is actually the real deal. The entirety of the gallery business model has been reproduced within Sedition Art, right? It's a gallery for electronic art, video art, and new media art. However, there's no room in it for net.art because you can't hack it. You're not supposed to mess with it. You're not supposed to get your hands into the guts of it. On the contrary, if that happens, then the cat is among the pigeons because somebody might break into my vault and take all my stuff. So, I've had discussions with people at Sedition Art over this. It's what's the worst case alternative? It's what happens if something happens to the vault? That's okay. We've got it backed up in the Cayman Islands. We have stuff on disk hidden in a big steel vault. Okay, they've done their level best to work their way through this. It's an exciting development in the tech art world. They're real artists on this thing. I'm happy with them. I knew it was coming, but there's also something different and slightly creepy about it. It really represents not a skeuomorph exactly, but a kind of taming of the net.art frontier. I mean, it actually makes too much sense. I can pay things. I can brag about what I have. I can possess them. There's only so many. I've got mine. I'm just like a guy buying postage stamps or, of fine art. I'm for the first time in my life, I'm actually tempted to buy art because I know it will go up in price. I know I could speculate in this. If it got bigger, I could probably earn a living at it without even leaving my chair. Because, I'm actually kind of knowledgeable about net art. I know who's good. I could become like an art world entrepreneur, just like these guys who are financing Freeze magazine. It's like you're just moving out of this elaborate digital cyber world into a much more conventional, realized, pretty well designed, interesting art space. And I might fall head over heels for a thing like this, if not for the fact that I know Olia. And every time I sit in there waiting to point and click, hey man, it's only 15 euros. I bet it'll be 50 in a couple of years. I think of Olia. It's like user, interface, machine. It's not really an art gallery experience. It's not really even an art experience. I mean, it's just like stuff on a screen. And I like having my art on my screen. Don't get me wrong. I've got it in my pocket. I can whip it out and show you my Sedition vault. And go there. It's look. And then this thing happens. It's okay. And I'm I can be anywhere. I've got connectivity and everybody can see my art collection. They certainly can't do that with my book collection or these other things. It's full of convenience, but I'm just alert about it. I wouldn't even say wary. I would say that I'm conscientious about it, really. And, it's been helpful. So Olia's net artwork would probably not work in this format. She's done other things, GIF art, so forth, that might. But, for work which is so thorny and refusenik, which can't really be conventionally paid for, conventionally owned, this is not really the venue for work of that kind. And, it's a new venue. I don't know what will become of it. It may not last 20 years as Olia's work has lasted, but it's truly a significant development and one that I watch. And after 20 years, I intuit, not that net art is doing well, but that Olia is actually doing well. And I think Olia is has not yet given us the artwork she is destined to give us. The situation seems dark, and she's rather a voice in the wilderness, but I think she will grow by the strength of her adversaries. It's as we are surrounded by the people, the experience, and so forth, then her countertone will be more clear, and it will prevent people from becoming sneaking apologists for the status quo. It is a valuable corrective for that, especially when you are my age. When I look at the Yellow Notepad and its frank hideousness, why, I ask, did I ever concur in this, when I know very well that it could have been otherwise? So, to conclude, the big problem in successful dissidence, in net.art is not ceaselessly complaining about the limits of the status quo. The real problem is in taking yes for an answer. Sedition is trying to give yes for an answer. Okay, you want to be an electronic artist? Yeah. You want a lot of people to see your work? Yeah. You want to be socially influential? Yeah. You want to have a big audience, become famous, go to a lot of openings, have a soiree? Yeah. Well, why don't you join us? We know how to do all that. We're in London. We got money. We got funding. We got venture capital guy. We got collectors. We have knowledgeable people. We're saying yes. We're saying yes. How do you take yes for an answer? What would be the biggest thing that net.art could possibly do? Well, the biggest thing would probably be a work of subversive net art that was as big a deal as, say, the subversive work of Marcel Duchamp. It's a world-changing kind of conceptual hack that just puts people's perceptions on their ear more or less indefinitely. And it's never been done by net.art, But I think it's possible. I think it's possible to do it because the net is omnipresent. It's just so huge. It's everywhere. It has infiltrated every aspect of our experience. It's much bigger than the conventional gallery system. It's bigger than the museum industries. It's bigger than the entire heritage culture industry. It's really, really big, and the companies that are running it and dominating it are the biggest companies in the world. What would massively popular, genuinely culturally influential net.art actually look like in a world where the net is wider spread than plumbing or literacy? What if it actually worked? Okay, it might remain a minor hacking craft like reusing watch parts. It'd be kind of a glorified version of steampunk for, a fan cognoscenti. Or it might do something completely unexpected, just really unpredictable. And my boyfriend came back from the war was the first thing I saw on the internet that was completely unexpected to me. The last thing I expected to see was internet art from a St. Petersburg film school on my monitor. I have never forgotten seeing that in 20 years, and really, it persists as a sign of hope. Thank you.